Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever found yourself staring at a screen at 2 a.m., hit with that absolute sheer bibliography panic, yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We've all been there. You've done the hard work, you've absorbed the knowledge, and then suddenly you're faced with formatting academic citations for digital formats that simply didn't even exist when the rulebooks were first written. Today, we're taking a highly structured, visual approach to cracking the code on citing newsletters in Harvard style.
So here's the million-dollar question. How do you actually cite an email newsletter without totally ruining your perfectly crafted bibliography? It's a massive headache, right? We're constantly trying to apply these incredibly strict, traditional academic rules to incredibly modern, non-traditional formats. It honestly feels a bit like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. But don't sweat it. The rules actually do exist, and as you'll see, they're highly logical once we break them down together.
All right, let's get right into it with Section 1, the Newsletter Citation Dilemma. Okay. So before you type a single word of your citation, you've got to make a really crucial decision. It's the foundation of your reference. Are you citing a whole issue of a newsletter, like, say, analyzing the overarching theme of a weekly digest? Or are you citing just one article specifically contained within it, maybe a brilliant deep dive essay from a Substack you follow? The formatting demands change completely depending on your answer. For the sake of our deep dive today, we're going to focus purely on what happens when you need to cite a single specific article, just because that pathway requires the absolute highest level of detail.
Moving right along to Section 2, Anatomy of a Reference.
Now, what's really fascinating about this anatomy is the sheer precision required to make a digital source bulletproof. If you go with the single article route, you're looking at a vital 8-point checklist. You need the author, the year, and the specific article title. But it doesn't stop there. You also absolutely need the broader newsletter title, the issue or volume number, the exact full date, the page range if there is one, and finally the URL if it's hosted online. I know, it sounds like a ton of data, but every single piece of this puzzle guarantees that the exact digital thought you're quoting is properly documented and, most importantly, effortlessly retrievable by anyone reading your work.
Now, all of that heavy data, that's just for your bibliography at the very end of your paper. Once you've built that main reference, the actual in-text citation, the one you drop into the body of your text, is wonderfully simple. You just pair the author or the organization with the year of publication. That's it. It's clean, it's efficient, and it points your reader directly back to that massive 8-point reference we just built.
Which brings us to Section 3, Navigating Tricky Edge Cases.
This is where things get genuinely fascinating, mostly because digital formats just love to ignore traditional publishing norms. Like, what happens when you run into this scenario? There is literally no named writer. Think about how often you receive an incredibly informative, organization-wide newsletter, but there is absolutely no specific byline attached. Who on earth do you credit? How do you fill in that very first mandatory field of your reference?
Well, the fix here is actually really practical. You use what's defined as the organization as author. When you're dealing with an organization-wide newsletter that simply lacks a named writer, do not panic and definitely don't just leave the field blank. You simply swap out the missing writer's name and use the responsible organization itself as the author. Boom. This perfectly satisfies the Harvard requirement while completely maintaining the integrity of the source's origin. All right, let's tackle another highly specific trap that catches students and researchers all the time. Is an email newsletter considered a personal communication? I mean, it arrives right in your personal inbox, sitting there next to emails from your colleagues or your family, so it's super tempting to just format it as a private, personal email, right?
Actually, scratch that. We have to completely bust this myth, because this perfectly illustrates the difference between a delivery method and how a source is actually categorized. Just because a publicly retrievable newsletter drops directly into your personal digital inbox does not automatically make it a private personal communication in the eyes of academic referencing. In fact, let's look at the definitive rule on this. Quote, email delivery does not automatically make a newsletter a personal communication if the issue is publicly retrievable. So the absolute deciding factor here is public retrievability. The delivery method, the fact that it came to you via email, is literally irrelevant. If anyone else in the public can find and retrieve that same newsletter issue online, it is a published digital source. It is not a private conversation.
Let's wrap things up with a huge sigh of relief. In Section 4, the automated shortcut.
Because honestly, once you truly understand these strict rules, you can absolutely lean on technology to do the heavy lifting for you. It's a beautifully simple two-step process. Step 1, you still have to put in the intellectual work.
You have to identify the specific article, the issue, the responsible author, and the stable access info, like the URL. But step 2, once you've meticulously gathered that specific data, you just plug it into harvardreferencegenerator.co.uk. As long as you feed it the correct info, this tool will literally automatically generate a perfectly formatted Harvard newsletter reference for you.
By really understanding the fundamental architecture of the citation, you take complete control of the process. Master the anatomy, and you skip the frustration. You now know exactly how to distinguish between an issue and an article, how to handle missing authors, and why your inbox delivery absolutely does not equal a personal communication. So I leave you with this final thought. Will your next digital citation be perfectly retrievable? Armed with this framework, I am absolutely confident it will be. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.